Take a breath. This one stays with you. Sycamore Lane is the kind of street where people wave from porches, where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on, where everyone knows which house bakes cookies at Christmas and which one never answers the door. It sits in a mid-sized town, unremarkable, tree-lined, the sort of place where nothing is supposed to go wrong. But something did, and for years, no one said a word. The house at the end of the block is a single-story ranch with white siding that has gone grey in places. The lawn is mowed, but not carefully. The curtains stay closed. The mailbox is dented. There is no name on it. No car in the driveway most days. No lights on at night. And no one, not one neighbor, ever knocks on that door. They will tell you later, when the cameras arrive, that they thought it was just someone who valued privacy. Someone who worked nights. Someone who did not want company. But that is not the whole truth. The whole truth is that no one wanted to know. This case starts with a gas leak. On a cold Tuesday morning in early spring, a utility worker named Dennis Halford was sent to Sycamore Lane to check underground lines. Routine maintenance. He parked his truck near the end of the block, pulled his equipment from the back, and began scanning the street with a handheld detector. The readings were normal until he reached the property line of the last house, the one no one visits. The detector spiked, not dramatically, but enough. He walked the perimeter, following the fence line, and the numbers climbed higher near the back corner of the yard. Standard protocol required him to knock, to inform the resident, to ask permission to access the backyard if needed. So he walked up the driveway, past a rusted metal trash can that had not been moved in weeks, and knocked on the front door. No answer. He knocked again, waited, checked his watch, tried the doorbell. It did not work. He stepped back, looked at the windows, all covered. He called the number listed on the account. It rang 6 times and went to a generic voicemail. He left a message. Dennis should have left. His supervisor would say later that he followed protocol. But Dennis had been doing this job for 11 years, and something about the quiet of that house bothered him. He walked around the side, through the narrow gap between the fence and the wall, into the backyard. The grass back there was taller. Weeds pushed through cracks in a concrete patio. A rusted grill sat in one corner, its cover half collapsed. And near the back fence, almost hidden by overgrown shrubs, was a small wooden door set into the ground. A cellar entrance. The detector was louder here. Dennis crouched down, checked the edges of the door. It was not locked. The wood was swollen from moisture, but when he pulled, it gave. He shone his flashlight down into the dark. And that is when he saw it. A single winter coat, hanging from a nail on the wall, dark blue, quilted, with a torn pocket. It was not the coat itself that made him stop. It was the fact that it was hanging there, alone in a cellar that smelled like damp earth and something else he could not name. And it was small, a child's coat. Dennis backed out. He closed the door. He called his supervisor. Within 2 hours, police were on the scene. I arrived 3 days later. My name does not matter. What matters is that I have spent the last decade chasing stories that do not want to be found. Cold cases, unresolved disappearances, families still waiting. This case landed in my inbox as a tip from a contact in the county records office. She told me the address, told me what the utility worker had found, and told me that the department was being quiet about it. Too quiet. So I drove out to Sycamore Lane on a Thursday afternoon, parked across the street, and watched. The house was cordoned off with police tape. 2 patrol cars sat in the driveway. A detective in a grey jacket stood near the front door, speaking into his phone. I did not approach. Not yet. Instead, I walked the block, knocked on doors, and asked neighbors what they knew. Most of them did not want to talk. A woman in her 60s told me she had lived on the street for 30 years and could not remember the last time she had seen anyone go in or out of that house. A man mowing his lawn 2 doors down said he thought the owner worked for the county, maybe, or used to. Another neighbor, younger, with a baby on her hip, said she always felt weird walking past it. She did not know why. But one person was willing to sit down with me. Her name was Caroline Reese. She lived directly across the street. Caroline invited me into her living room. She offered coffee. I accepted. She sat on the edge of her couch, hands folded in her lap, and stared out the window at the house across the street. I should have said something years ago, she said quietly. I asked her what she meant. She told me that the man who lived there, his name was Howard Leland, had moved in about 15 years prior. He was polite, quiet, worked some kind of night shift, she thought. He kept to himself. At first, people tried to be neighborly. They brought casseroles, invited him to block parties. He always declined. After a while, they stopped trying. But Caroline noticed things, small things, the kind of things you only notice if you are paying attention. She noticed that his trash can was always light, almost empty. She noticed that his car, an older sedan, would leave late at night and return before dawn. She noticed that sometimes, on summer evenings, she would hear a radio playing inside the house, but never voices. And she noticed that once, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, she saw a child's bicycle leaning against the side of the house, just for a day. Then, it was gone. I thought maybe he had family visiting, she said, or maybe he was storing it for someone. I did not think it was my business. I asked her if she ever saw a child. She shook her head, but she paused before answering. There was one time, she said, late at night, I could not sleep. I was standing at the window, just looking out, and I saw his front door open, just a crack, and I thought I saw someone small, a shadow. It was only for a second. The door closed. I told myself I imagined it. I asked her if she reported it. She looked down at her hands. No. The coat found in the cellar was sent to the state lab. Forensics confirmed it was a child size, approximately for a 7 or 8-year-old. The fabric showed signs of long-term exposure to humidity. There were no labels, no identifiable marks. But inside the left pocket, folded tight, was a small piece of paper, a receipt. The receipt was faded, nearly illegible, but the lab was able to recover enough detail to identify the store. A discount retailer about 40 minutes north. The date on the receipt was 11 years old. That receipt became the spine of this investigation, because once you had a date, you had a window. And once you had a window, you could start pulling records. I requested missing persons reports from the surrounding counties for the 2-year period around that receipt. I cross-referenced them with children between the ages of 5 and 10. I looked for cases that went cold, cases where leads dried up, cases where families were still waiting. 3 names came up. The first was a boy who disappeared from a grocery store parking lot. His case was heavily publicized. His face was on billboards. He was found 6 months later, safe, with a relative in another state. Ruled a custody dispute. The second was a girl who vanished from a park. Her case is still open, but her family lived on the opposite side of the state, and there was no connection to Sycamore Lane or Howard Leland. The third was a boy named Ethan Corey. He was 7 years old when he disappeared from a community pool. His mother, Angela Corey, reported him missing within an hour. She told police he had been playing near the shallow end, and when she looked up from her phone, he was gone. Witnesses remembered seeing a man in a grey shirt talking to a boy near the exit gate, but no one got a clear look at his face. The case went cold within weeks. Ethan Corey was never found. I pulled every file I could access on the Corey case. I contacted Angela Corey, who still lives in the same town, still answers calls from reporters, still hoping. I asked her if the name Howard Leland meant anything to her. She said no. I asked her if she remembered anyone in a grey shirt at the pool that day. She said half the men there were wearing grey. But then I asked her about the coat. She went silent. Ethan had a coat like that, she said. Blue, quilted. I'd bought it at a discount store because he kept losing his jackets. It had a torn pocket. He caught it on a fence. I felt the floor tilt. I asked her if she still had the receipt. She said she threw everything away years ago. She could not stand to look at his things, but she remembered the store. It matched. Now listen carefully, because this is where the case splits open. Howard Leland was not home when police arrived. He has not been home since. His car is gone. His bank account has not been accessed. His phone goes straight to voicemail. He is, for all practical purposes, gone. The house was searched top to bottom. The cellar was excavated. The walls were stripped. Cadaver dogs were brought in. They alerted in 2 places, the cellar and a section of the backyard near the fence line. Soil samples were taken. Forensic analysis is still ongoing. But here is what they found. In the cellar, beneath a layer of old carpet, there were scratch marks on the concrete floor. Deep ones. The kind made by something metal being dragged. In the corner, behind a stack of cardboard boxes, there was a narrow space, just wide enough for a child to hide, or be hidden. On the wall, written in pencil, barely visible, were tally marks. 17 of them. Upstairs, in the main house, everything was clean. Too clean. The furniture was minimal. The kitchen had no food. The bathroom had no toiletries. It looked like a stage set, like someone had removed all evidence of living. But in the bedroom closet, behind a panel that had been screwed into the wall, investigators found a shoebox. Inside were photographs, not of people, of places, playgrounds, schools, public pools, community centers. Each photograph had a date written on the back in small, careful handwriting. The dates spanned 12 years. And in the bottom of the box, wrapped in plastic, was a single key. The key did not match any lock in the house. It did not match the cellar door. It did not match Howard Leland's car. Forensics is still trying to determine what it opens. Angela Corey was brought in to view the coat. She could not say with certainty that it was Ethan's. It had been too long. But she held it in her hands, ran her fingers over the torn pocket, and said, "It could be." That is not proof, not legally, but it is enough to reopen the case. The investigation is active. Multi-agency. The FBI is involved now. They are tracking Howard Leland's movements over the past 2 decades, pulling employment records, checking surveillance footage from the areas surrounding those photograph locations. They are interviewing neighbors, co-workers, anyone who might have seen something. But so far, Howard Leland remains a ghost. I have been following this case every day since it broke. I have read every report I can access. I have spoken to investigators off the record, and I keep coming back to the same questions. How long was he doing this? How many children? And why did no one notice? Caroline Reese sits in her living room every night now, staring out the window at the house across the street. She told me she feels like she failed, like she should have trusted her instincts, like she should have knocked on that door years ago. But here is the thing about cases like this, the thing that keeps me awake. It is not just one person who fails to see. It is all of us. We walk past, we look away, we tell ourselves it is not our business. And somewhere in the space we create by not looking, something terrible grows. This case is not over. Howard Leland is still out there. The key has not been matched. The forensic reports are still being compiled. And there are other families, other missing children, who might finally have answers. But for now, all we have is a coat, a receipt, and a house at the end of Sycamore Lane that no one ever visited. I will keep following this. I will keep asking questions. And when there is more to tell, I will come back. Until then, pay attention to the houses you pass, to the neighbors you never see, to the quiet that feels wrong. Because sometimes the worst things happen in plain sight. The day after I spoke with Caroline Reese, I drove north to the discount retailer where the receipt had originated. The store was still there, tucked into a strip mall between a dollar store and a tax preparation office. The building had been repainted since the receipt was printed, but the layout was the same. I went inside and asked to speak with a manager. A woman in her 40s named Brenda Hollis came out from the back. I showed her my press credentials and explained what I was looking for. She looked uncomfortable immediately. "We don't keep transaction records that far back," she said. "And even if we did, we couldn't share them without a warrant." I told her I understood, but I asked if she remembered working here 11 years ago. She had. She had been an assistant manager then. I asked her if she remembered anything unusual from that time period, anyone who stood out, anyone who bought children's clothing but seemed off. She shook her head slowly. "We get hundreds of people a day. I couldn't tell you who bought what a decade ago." But then she paused. "Wait," she said. "There was something, not about a customer, about the security footage." I leaned in. She told me that about 10 or 11 years ago, Police had come to the store asking for surveillance tapes. They were investigating a missing child case. She did not remember which one. The store handed over the footage, but she remembered the detective saying something strange. He said the timestamps on the tapes did not line up with the reported timeline, like someone had been in the store, but at a different time than expected. She did not know what came of it. The police never followed up with the store again. I asked her if she remembered the detective's name. She did not, but she thought the case file might still be in the store's back records, in a box marked for legal holds. She said she would look, but it might take a few days. I left my contact information and walked back out to the parking lot. I stood there for a moment, looking at the strip mall, trying to imagine Howard Leland standing in this same spot, holding a coat he had just purchased, knowing what he planned to do with it. The thought made my stomach turn. I got back in my car and started making calls. I needed to know more about Howard Leland, who he was before Sycamore Lane, where he worked, where he came from. People do not appear out of nowhere. I started with public records. Howard Leland had a driver's license issued in the state 22 years ago. Before that, nothing. No previous address. No prior employment records in the state database. No criminal record. No military service. It was like he materialized fully formed 2 decades ago, and then quietly embedded himself in a neighborhood where no one asked questions. I contacted the county clerk's office and requested property records for the house on Sycamore Lane. The house had been purchased 18 years ago, paid in cash, under Howard Leland's name. The deed was clean. No liens, no co-signers, just a simple transfer of ownership. Cash purchases are not illegal, but they are unusual, and they leave fewer trails. I called a contact I have in the state tax office. She owed me a favor from a story I had helped her with years ago. I asked her to pull Howard Leland's tax filings for the past 2 decades. She called me back 3 hours later. He filed every year, she said. Always on time, always clean, claimed standard deductions, reported income from a single employer. I asked her what employer. She read the name off the screen. Hillcrest Logistics, warehousing and distribution. I wrote it down. I had never heard of them. Any red flags? I asked. None. His returns are boring, almost too boring. I thanked her and hung up. Then I looked up Hillcrest Logistics. The company was based about 30 minutes from Sycamore Lane. They operated a mid-sized warehouse that handled inventory for various retail clients. According to their website, they employed about 60 people. I called their main office and asked to speak with someone in human resources. A man named Tom Pritchard picked up. I explained that I was a journalist working on a story that involved a former or current employee named Howard Leland. I asked if he was still employed there. There was a pause. I can't discuss personnel matters, Tom said carefully. I told him I understood, but that this was part of an active police investigation, and if he preferred, I could have a detective contact him directly. Another pause. Howard Leland hasn't worked here in 3 weeks, Tom said finally. He stopped showing up. No call, no explanation. We tried to reach him. His phone was disconnected. We sent a letter to his address, It came back undeliverable. I asked how long he had worked there. 17 years, Tom said. Night shift, inventory control. Kept to himself, never caused problems, never missed a shift until he just didn't come back. I asked if anyone there knew him personally, if he had friends at work, if anyone had been to his house. No, Tom said. He didn't socialize, ate lunch alone, left as soon as his shift ended. A couple of guys tried to include him in things over the years. He always declined. I asked if Howard ever mentioned family, kids, a wife. Never. I asked if there had been any incidents, any complaints, anything that stood out. Tom hesitated. There was one thing, he said. About 8 years ago, one of the other night shift workers reported that Howard had been looking at something on his phone during a break. Said it looked like photographs of children. The worker thought it was weird, reported it to his supervisor. The supervisor talked to Howard. Howard said they were his nieces and nephews. Showed the supervisor a few pictures. Said he was helping his sister plan a birthday party. The supervisor let it go. I asked if anyone followed up, if anyone verified the sister. No, Tom said. It didn't seem like enough to pursue. And Howard was a good employee, reliable. We didn't want to accuse him of something without cause. I thanked Tom and ended the call. Then I sat in my car, staring at my notes, feeling the weight of all the small moments where someone could have asked one more question. Howard Leland's story was too clean. No history before 22 years ago. A cash home purchase. A job where he worked alone at night. A life built specifically to avoid scrutiny. That kind of care does not happen by accident. It happens when someone knows they have something to hide. I started digging into the name itself. Howard Leland. It sounded ordinary, generic. I ran it through a database that tracks name changes and legal aliases. Nothing came up under that exact name. But when I expanded the search to include similar names, something pinged. A Harold Leonard had legally changed his name 23 years ago in a neighboring state. The petition for the name change was filed in a county courthouse about 200 miles west. I called the courthouse and requested a copy of the name change petition. They told me it would take a few days to process. I paid the expedite fee. While I waited, I reached out to a private investigator I had worked with on previous cases. His name was Marcus Webb. He specialized in backgrounds and digital forensics. I sent him everything I had on Howard Leland and asked him to build a profile. Marcus called me back the next morning. "This guy is a ghost," Marcus said. I pulled his credit report. It's thin. He has one credit card, barely used. No loans. No mortgage because he paid cash. No car payments. His phone records show almost no outgoing calls. No social media presence. No online footprint. It's like he designed his entire life to be invisible. I asked Marcus if that was even possible in the modern age. "It is if you're careful," Marcus said. "And if you started before everything went digital." This guy set up his life in the early 2000s, before surveillance became total. He picked a quiet job, a quiet neighborhood, and he just stayed under the radar. I asked Marcus what that suggested to him. "Either he's running from something," Marcus said, "or he's hiding something he's still doing. Both options felt true. The name change documents arrived 3 days later. I opened the envelope and read through the petition. Harold Leonard had filed to change his name to Howard Leland, citing personal reasons. The petition was approved without objection. There was no detail about why he wanted the change. Just a signature and a judge's stamp. But attached to the petition was a previous address, a town called Riverbank, 200 miles west, near the state line. I plugged the address into a mapping tool. It was a small rural town, population under 5,000. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone. The kind of place where a name change might mean something. I got in my car and started driving. Riverbank sits in a valley, surrounded by farmland and low hills. The main street has a post office, a diner, a hardware store, and a bar. I parked near the diner and went inside. It was mid-afternoon, and the place was mostly empty. A waitress in her 50s came over with a pot of coffee. I ordered a cup and asked her how long she had lived in Riverbank. "My whole life," she said. I asked her if she remembered a man named Harold Leonard. Her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. "Why are you asking?" she said. I told her I was a journalist, that I was looking into a case that might involve him, that I was trying to understand who he was before he left town. She set the coffee pot down and glanced toward the kitchen. Then she sat down across from me. "Harold Leonard," she said quietly, "was a problem." I asked her what she meant. She told me that Harold had lived in Riverbank in his 20s. He worked at a feed supply store, kept to himself mostly, but people noticed things. He would show up at the park when kids were playing. He would sit on a bench, watch them, and leave when parents started noticing. A few times, parents complained to the police. The police talked to him. He said he liked the fresh air, that he was not doing anything wrong. Then one summer, a girl went missing. Her name was Lacey Brennan. She was 9 years old. She disappeared from a church picnic. She was found 2 days later, alive, wandering on a rural road about 10 miles outside town. She was dehydrated and confused. She could not or would not say what had happened. She just kept saying she got lost. But her parents did not believe that. Neither did the police. They questioned everyone at the picnic. Harold Leonard had been there. He said he left early. No one could confirm or deny it. The case went nowhere. Lacey stopped talking about it. Her family moved away a few months later. And not long after that, Harold Leonard left town too. People were relieved, the waitress said. No one wanted him here, but no one had proof of anything, so he just left. I asked her if she thought Harold Leonard had taken Lacey. She looked me in the eye. "Yes," she said, "I do." I asked if anyone ever followed up, if anyone ever reported him after he left. She shook her head. People wanted to forget, and he was gone. So they did. I finished my coffee and left cash on the table. I walked back to my car, my hands shaking slightly. Harold Leonard had been a suspect 23 years ago. He had changed his name, moved, built a new life, and continued. And no one stopped him. I called the detective handling the Sycamore Lane case. His name was Lieutenant Eric Garner. I had spoken with him briefly when the story first broke, but he had been guarded. Now I had something to give him. I told him about Harold Leonard, about Riverbank, about Lacey Brennan. I gave him the name change documents and the contact information for the waitress. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "We're already looking into prior names," he said, "but this helps. Thank you." I asked him if there was anything new from the house. "Not that I can share," he said, "but we're working it hard, and we will find him." I believed him, but I also knew that finding Howard Leland, or Harold Leonard, or whatever name he was using now, might not happen quickly. Men like him know how to disappear. They have practice. I drove back towards Sycamore Lane as the sun started to set. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy and grey. I parked a block away from the house and walked slowly past it. The police tape was still up. The windows were still dark. I thought about Ethan Corey, about Lacey Brennan, about all the other names I had not found yet, about the 17 tally marks on the cellar wall. And I thought about the key, the small brass key that had been hidden in a shoebox, wrapped in plastic, waiting to unlock something. What did it open? I did not know yet, but I was going to find out. The forensic reports from the house came back in pieces over the following week. Each one added another layer of dread. The soil samples from the backyard showed traces of human decomposition, but the concentrations were inconclusive. Either someone had been buried there and moved, or the disturbance was minimal enough to degrade over time. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. It showed anomalies in 3 locations, all within a 6-foot radius near the back fence. Excavation was authorized. I was not allowed on site during the dig. No press was, but I had a contact in the department who fed me updates as they came. The first hole produced nothing. The second produced fragments of fabric, heavily degraded, and a single child-sized sneaker. The third produced bone. Not a full skeleton, just fragments, small ones. The medical examiner confirmed they were human. Juvenile. Age range estimated between 6 and 10 years old. DNA extraction was underway, but it would take weeks to process and longer to match against missing persons databases. The sneaker was sent to the lab. The brand was identified as a discount line sold in chain stores across the region. The size matched a child approximately 7 or 8 years old. The sole showed wear patterns consistent with regular use. It had been in the ground for years. I requested access to the evidence logs. I wanted to see the photographs from inside the house, the items catalogued, the layout of the cellar. Lieutenant Garner denied the request, citing the active investigation, but he agreed to meet with me off the record. We met at a coffee shop 15 minutes outside of town. Garner was in his late 40s, graying at the temples, with the kind of exhaustion that comes from working cases that do not let you sleep. He ordered black coffee and sat across from me in a corner booth. "You understand this stays between us," he said. I nodded. He leaned back and rubbed his eyes. "We've been through that house 3 times now. The cellar, the attic, every crawl space. The place is a nightmare, not because of what we found, but because of what we didn't find." I asked him what he meant. "There's no blood," he said. "No biological evidence in the main living spaces. No sign of struggle. The cellar has trace evidence, but it's minimal. Whoever lived there knew how to clean. He knew how to remove evidence. The only reason we have anything at all is because he missed the backyard. Or maybe he ran out of time. And I asked about the photographs found in the shoebox, the ones of playgrounds and schools. Garner nodded slowly. We've been working through those. Each location has been identified. We've cross-referenced them with missing persons cases in the surrounding areas over the past 15 years. So far, we have possible connections to 4 cases. 4 children who went missing near those locations within a 6-month window of the date written on the photograph. 4. I felt the air leave my lungs. Are any of them Ethan Corey? I asked. One is, Garner said. The community pool where he disappeared. Howard Leland photographed that location 2 weeks before Ethan went missing. I asked about the others. Garner pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket and slid it across the table. It was a printed list. 3 names besides Ethan Corey. Mia Delgado, age 6. Disappeared from a playground. Last seen on the swings. Parents were nearby but distracted. Case went cold within a year. Colin Trask, age 8. Disappeared from a school parking lot after a soccer game. Witnesses reported seeing a man in a dark jacket near the field. No clear description. Case still open. Sophie Arnett, age 7. Disappeared from a community center during a weekend art class. Her mother dropped her off and returned an hour later to find her gone. Security footage was reviewed, but showed nothing conclusive. Case went cold after 6 months. I stared at the names. 4 children. 4 families. 4 lives shattered. We've contacted all the families, Garner said. We're arranging for DNA samples to compare against the remains. It's going to take time, but if any of these kids were in that house, we'll know. I asked him about the key. Garner's expression darkened. We still don't know what it opens. We've tried every lock in the house, every vehicle associated with Howard Leland, every known property in his name. Nothing matches. We've sent it to a locksmith specialist. They're analyzing the cut pattern, trying to determine what kind of lock it belongs to. I asked if it could be a storage unit. Possible, Garner said. We're checking rental facilities in a 50-mile radius, but there are hundreds of them. And if he used a fake name or paid cash, it could take months to track down. I asked if they had any leads on Howard Leland's current location. Garner shook his head. He's off the grid. No credit card activity. No phone pings. No bank withdrawals. His car hasn't been spotted. We've issued a regional alert, but so far, nothing. He knew this was coming. He planned for it. I asked how he could have known. Garner sighed. The utility worker. Dennis Halford. He knocked on that door. He called the listed number and left a voicemail. Howard Leland didn't answer, but the call log exists. If Leland checked his messages, he would have known someone had been to the house. That's when he ran. So Dennis Halford's routine call had tipped him off. A gas leak check. A knock on the door. And Howard Leland had vanished. We're working with the FBI now, Garner said. They're running his face through facial recognition databases, checking border crossings, looking at travel records under known aliases. But this guy has been careful for decades. He's not going to slip up easily. I I thanked Garner for meeting with me. He told me to be careful. He said there was a chance that Howard Leland was watching, that he might be following news coverage of the case, that men like him sometimes circle back. I told him I understood. But as I walked back to my car, I realized I did not feel afraid. I felt angry. Over the next few days, I tracked down the families of the 4 children. I did not approach them lightly. I knew what I was asking them to relive. But they deserved to know that someone was still looking, that their children had not been forgotten. I started with Mia Delgado's mother, Rosa. She lived in a small apartment about 40 minutes south of Sycamore Lane. She answered the door with caution, her eyes scanning me before she let me speak. I introduced myself. I told her I was following the case of Howard Leland. I asked if the police had contacted her. She nodded slowly. They called yesterday. They want a DNA sample. They said they found something. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. I asked if I could sit with her for a few minutes. She hesitated, then stepped aside and let me in. The apartment was small and tidy. Photographs of Mia covered one wall. A little girl with dark curls and a bright smile. Rosa sat on the couch and folded her hands in her lap. They told me they found remains, she said quietly. They told me it might be her. I asked her how she was holding up. She looked at me like the question did not make sense. I've been holding up for 11 years. This doesn't change that. I asked her if she remembered anything about the day Mia disappeared. Anything that stood out. She nodded. There was a man. I didn't think about it at the time. He was sitting on a bench near the playground. Just sitting. Watching. I thought he was a parent, but he didn't have a kid with him. And when I looked over a second time, Mia was gone. I asked if she remembered what he looked like. Not really, she said. Average height, dark jacket. He had a hat on. I never saw his face clearly. The police showed me some photos back then, lineups, but I couldn't identify anyone. I asked if she would recognize him if she saw him again. She looked at the photographs on the wall. I don't know, maybe, but I've imagined his face so many times over the years. I'm not sure I'd know the difference between memory and what I made up. I thanked her and left my contact information. I told her that if the DNA came back as a match, I would cover the story with care, that I would make sure people knew Mia's name. She nodded but did not say anything. I let myself out. Colin Trask's father, Paul, was harder to reach. He had moved twice since his son disappeared. He did not answer his phone. I left messages. On the third day, he called me back. I don't talk to reporters, he said. I told him I understood, but I explained what I was working on. I told him about Howard Leland, about the photographs, about the remains. There was a long silence. They called me too, Paul said finally. They told me the same thing they probably told the others, that they need DNA, that it might take months, that I should prepare myself. I asked him if he was okay. He laughed bitterly. No, but I haven't been okay in 8 years, so what's the difference? I asked if he remembered anything unusual from the day Colin disappeared. Everything about that day was unusual, Paul said. My son was there 1 minute and gone the next. We searched for hours. The police searched for weeks. And then nothing. Just nothing. You know what the worst part is? Not knowing. You can't grieve. You can't move on. You're just stuck. I asked if he would be willing to meet in person. No, he said. I'm done with meetings. I'm done with questions. If they find him, they'll tell me. Until then, leave me alone. He hung up. I did not blame him. Sophie Arnett's mother, Jennifer, agreed to meet me at a park near her house. She brought her younger daughter, a girl of about 5, who played on the swings while we talked on a bench nearby. Jennifer looked tired, the kind of tired that does not go away with sleep. Sophie would be 14 now, she said, watching the little girl on the swings. I think about that every day. What grade she'd be in, what music she'd like, if she'd still let me hug her. I asked her if the police had been in touch. She nodded. They told me they found something, that it might be connected. I gave them a DNA sample yesterday. They said it could take weeks. I asked her if she remembered the day Sophie disappeared. Every second of it, Jennifer said. I dropped her off at the community center for an art class. It was a Saturday morning. She was so excited. She had a little backpack with markers and a sketchbook. I told her I'd be back in an hour. When I came back, the class was over. The other kids were gone. And Sophie wasn't there. End quote. I asked if anyone saw her leave. The teacher said Sophie asked to use the bathroom about halfway through the class. She said yes. Sophie never came back. The teacher assumed she had come back and left with the other kids. She didn't realize Sophie was missing until I showed up. I asked if there were security cameras. There were, Jennifer said, but they didn't cover the bathroom hallway or the back exit. The police reviewed the footage. They saw Sophie walk toward the bathroom. They never saw her come out. But the back door was unlocked. Someone could have taken her out that way. I asked if anyone unusual had been near the community center that day. Jennifer shook her head. Not that anyone remembered. It was a busy morning. Lots of people coming and going. The police interviewed everyone they could find. No one saw anything. I asked her what she thought happened. She looked at me, her eyes red but dry. I think someone was watching. I think someone waited for the right moment. And I think they took my daughter. I asked her if she thought Sophie was still alive. She did not answer right away. She watched her younger daughter swing higher, laughing, unaware. I used to think so, Jennifer said quietly. I used to believe she'd come home, but it's been 7 years, and now the police are asking for DNA to compare against remains. So no, I don't think she's alive anymore. Her voice did not break. It was worse than that. It was empty. I thanked her for talking to me. I told her I was sorry. She nodded and stood up, calling to her daughter that it was time to go. I stayed on the bench for a while after they left, watching the empty swings move slightly in the wind. By the time I got back to my apartment that evening, I had 3 voicemails. 2 were from Lieutenant Garner. 1 was from Marcus Webb, the private investigator. I called Marcus first. I found something, he said, about Harold Leonard, before Riverbank. I grabbed a pen. I traced his social security number back, Marcus said. It was issued 31 years ago. The address listed on the application was in a town called Millerton, about 400 miles northwest. I pulled records from that area. Harold Leonard lived there as a teenager. His parents died in a car accident when he was 17. He went into foster care for a year, then aged out of the system. After that, the trail goes cold for a few years. Then he shows up in Riverbank in his early 20s. I asked if there were any incidents in Millerton. "I'm still digging," Marcus said, "but I found a news article from around the time he was in foster care. A 10-year-old girl went missing from a park. She was found 3 days later, alive. She told police a teenager had tried to talk to her, offered her candy, tried to get her to come with him. She ran. The police investigated, but never made an arrest. The description she gave matched Harold Leonard's age and general appearance, but it wasn't enough for charges." I felt my chest tighten. "That's 3 towns," I said. 3 places where children went missing or were approached. Millerton, Riverbank, and now Sycamore Lane. "And those are just the ones I found," Marcus said. "There could be more." I thanked him and told him to keep digging. Then I called Lieutenant Garner back. He answered on the first ring. "We got a hit on the key," he said. I pulled over to the side of the road. My hands were shaking. "What kind of hit?" I asked. "The locksmith identified the key pattern," Garner said. "It's for a self-storage facility. Specifically, a brand called Secure Lock that was common in the mid-2000s. We cross-reference facilities in the region that use or used that system. We found one about 60 miles east, place called Stowaway Storage." I asked if they had checked it yet. "We're en route now," Garner said. "The facility manager is meeting us there. We have a warrant. I'll call you when we're done." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I sat in my car, staring at the dashboard, trying to process what this meant. A storage unit. Howard Leland had rented a storage unit and kept the key hidden in his house, wrapped in plastic, tucked away like it was the most important thing he owned. What was inside? I started driving east. I did not have the exact address, but I knew the general area. I pulled up a map on my phone and searched for storage facilities. Stowaway Storage appeared on the screen, located just off a rural highway near a town called Prescott. I plugged it into my GPS and kept driving. The rain started again, light at first, then heavier. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm as the road stretched out in front of me, flanked by bare trees and empty fields. I passed a gas station, a shuttered motel, a produce stand with a handwritten sign that said "closed for season." 60 miles took almost an hour in the rain. By the time I pulled into the gravel lot of Stowaway Storage, it was nearly dark. The facility was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The gate was open. 3 police vehicles were parked near the main office, their lights casting red and blue reflections on the wet pavement. I parked at the edge of the lot and got out. The rain soaked through my jacket immediately. I walked toward the office, but a uniformed officer stopped me before I got close. "This is an active scene," he said. "You need to leave." I showed him my press credentials. "I'm covering the Howard Leland case. Lieutenant Garner knows I'm here." The officer looked skeptical, but he radioed someone. A moment later, Garner appeared from around the side of the building. He looked even more exhausted than he had at the coffee shop. "You're persistent," he said. "Is it open?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "It's open." I asked if I could see it. "No," he said, "not yet. Maybe not ever. Depends on what the judge says. But I'll tell you this much. You were right to follow this case." I asked him what was inside. Garner looked back toward the storage unit, then at me. His jaw was tight. "Everything," he said. He would not elaborate. He told me to go home. He said he would call me when he could share more. I stood there in the rain, watching the police move in and out of one of the units, carrying evidence boxes, taking photographs, speaking in low voices. I did not go home. I went back to my car and waited. 2 hours later, Garner came out of the parking lot. He walked over to my car and knocked on the window. I rolled it down. "Go home," he said again. "Tell me what you found," I said. He was quiet for a long time. Then he crouched down, so we were at eye level. "Clothing," he said. "Children's clothing, organized by size. Shoes, backpacks, toys, dozens of items, all catalogued, all labeled with dates." I felt the air leave my chest. "How many?" I asked. "We're still counting," Garner said, "but it's more than 4. I asked if any of it matched the missing children. "We don't know yet," he said. "We're photographing everything. We'll send images to the families. Cross-reference with case files. It's going to take time. But yes, I think we're going to find matches." I asked if there was anything else in the unit. Garner hesitated. Then he nodded. "A laptop," he said. "Password protected. We're sending it to digital forensics. If there's anything on it, we'll find it." I asked if they found any indication of where Howard Leland might be now. "No," Garner said, "but we will. This is the break we needed. He kept all of this for a reason. He documented it. That means he's obsessive, and obsessive people make mistakes." I thanked him. He stood up and walked back toward the storage facility. I watched him disappear into the rain. Then I started my car and drove back toward town. I did not go home. I went to the office of the local newspaper, where I sometimes filed stories. I needed to write this down while it was fresh. I needed to document every detail before it slipped away. I sat at a desk in the empty newsroom and opened my laptop. I wrote for 3 hours. I wrote about the storage unit, about the clothing, about the 4 families waiting for answers, about Harold Leonard and Howard Leland, and the trail of missing children that stretched back decades. When I finished, I sent the draft to my editor with a note: "Hold until police clear for publication." Then I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. My phone rang. It was Marcus Webb. "I found another one," he said. I sat up. "Another what?" "Another town," Marcus said. "Between Riverbank and Sycamore Lane. A place called Grafton. Howard Leland lived there for about 3 years, right after he left Riverbank. I pulled records. He worked at a packaging plant, kept a low profile, and during the time he was there, 2 children went missing." I grabbed my notebook. "Tell me." "First one was a boy named Danny Ruiz, age 9. Disappeared from a Little League game. Parents thought he went to the bathroom. He never came back. Case went cold. Second one was a girl named Ashley Kemper, age 8. Vanished from a neighborhood block party. Witnesses said they saw her talking to a man near the street, but no one got a good look at him. She was never found. I asked if there was any evidence linking Harold Leonard to those cases. Not officially, Marcus said, but I found a police report. Someone called in a tip about a man who had been seen watching kids at the park near where Danny disappeared. The description was vague. The police followed up, but nothing came of it. The tip was filed and forgotten. I asked if the description matched Leonard. Close enough, Marcus said. Average height, dark clothing, hat pulled low. It's the same pattern. I asked Marcus to send me everything he had. Then I called Lieutenant Garner. He did not answer. I left a voicemail with the information about Grafton, about Danny Ruiz and Ashley Kemper, and asked him to call me back. Then I sat in the empty newsroom, staring at the names on my screen. Lacey Brennan, Mia Delgado, Colin Trask, Sophie Arnett, Ethan Corey, Danny Ruiz, Ashley Kemper. 7 names, 7 children, and those were just the ones I had found. How many more were there? The laptop from the storage unit was sent to the FBI's digital forensics lab. It took them 4 days to crack the password. When they did, Lieutenant Garner called me immediately. "You need to sit down," he said. I was already sitting. The laptop contained files, Garner said. Hundreds of files. Photographs, documents, spreadsheets. He kept records of everything. I asked what kind of records. Garner's voice was tight. Dates, locations, names, physical descriptions. He documented every child he targeted. Some he approached and didn't take. Some he took and released. Some he kept. I felt my stomach turn. How many? We're still going through it, Garner said, but preliminary count is over 30 entries spanning 2 decades. 30. I could not speak. Most of the entries are coded, Garner continued. Initials instead of full names. Locations identified by landmarks instead of addresses. But we're cross-referencing with missing persons databases. We've already matched 5 cases definitively, including Ethan Corey. I asked if there were photographs. Yes, Garner said quietly, but I can't describe them. Not to you, not to anyone. They're evidence now, and they're going to put him away for the rest of his life if we find him. I asked if any of the files indicated where he might be now. No, Garner said. The last entry was made 2 days before the utility workers showed up at his house. After that, nothing. He wiped his digital trail and ran. I asked if the FBI had any leads. They're tracking a few possibilities, Garner said. Financial records show he withdrew $5,000 in cash from an ATM 3 days before he disappeared. That's enough to keep him off the grid for a while. They're also looking at properties he might have access to, family connections, associates. But so far, nothing solid. End quote. I thanked Garner and hung up. Then I sat at my desk, staring at the wall, trying to process the scale of what Howard Leland had done. 30 children, over 20 years, and he had documented every single one. Why? That was the question that haunted me. Why keep records? Why risk having evidence that could destroy you? The answer, I realized, was the same reason people keep trophies, the same reason serial offenders revisit crime scenes. Because the act itself was not enough. They needed to relive it, to remember, to control the narrative in their own mind. Howard Leland had built an archive of his crimes, and he had kept it locked away in a storage unit, hidden but accessible, a place he could return to whenever he wanted to remember. The families were notified over the next week. DNA results started coming back from the lab. The bone fragments found in the backyard were matched to Sophie Arnett. The sneaker was confirmed to have belonged to Ethan Corey, based on DNA extracted from the insole. 2 confirmed dead. 2 families who finally had answers, even though the answers destroyed them. I reached out to Jennifer Arnett first. She agreed to meet me at the same park where we had spoken before. This time, she came alone. She sat on the bench and stared straight ahead. She did not cry. She did not speak for a long time. Finally, she said, "They told me they found her, that she's been gone all this time, that she's been in the ground while I kept hoping." I did not know what to say. There are no words that help. "I kept her room the same," Jennifer continued. "I thought maybe she'd come back. Maybe she'd walk through the door one day and everything would be okay. But she's not coming back. She's been dead for 7 years." I asked her how she was going to move forward. She looked at me like the question was absurd. "I don't know. How do you move forward from this?" I told her I was sorry. She nodded. Then she stood up and walked away. Angela Corey, Ethan's mother, did not want to meet. She spoke to me over the phone. Her voice was hollow. "They found his shoe," she said. "They told me it was buried in that man's yard. My son was there, in that house, and I didn't know. I've been looking for him for 11 years, and he was there the whole time." I asked her if she had anything she wanted to say publicly. "Yes," she said. "Find him. Find Howard Leland. Find him, and make sure he never sees daylight again." I told her I would do everything I could to keep the story alive. She hung up without saying goodbye. The other families were still waiting. DNA tests were ongoing for the remains and the items found in the storage unit. Mia Delgado's mother was told there was a possible match to a piece of clothing. Colin Trask's father refused to give a statement. Danny Ruiz's family could not be reached. Ashley Kemper's mother agreed to speak with police but declined media interviews. I kept digging. I kept calling contacts. I kept following every lead. And then, 3 weeks after the storage unit was discovered, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. There was silence on the other end, just breathing. "Hello?" I said. A voice, male, calm, almost polite. "You've been writing about me." My blood went cold. "Who is this?" I asked. "You know who this is." I did. "Howard Leland," I said. "That's one of my names," he said. "You've been busy, talking to families, talking to police, digging up my past." I grabbed my phone recorder and hit record. My hands were shaking. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. "Because you're telling my story wrong," he said. I asked him what he meant. "You're making me into a monster," he said, "but you don't understand. You don't know what it's like to have a need that never goes away, a need that defines everything you do." I felt sick. "You killed children," I said. "Some of them," he said. "Not all. Some I let go. Some I kept for a while. It depended." I asked him what it depended on. He laughed softly. "On whether they were interesting." I asked him where he was. "Somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere no one will find me. I've been planning this for years. I knew it would end eventually. I just didn't think it would be because of a gas leak." I asked him why he kept the storage unit. "Because I wanted to remember," he said. "Because the memories fade if you don't preserve them. I needed to know it was real, that it happened, that I did it." I asked him if he felt any remorse. "No," he said. "Why would I?" I asked him if he was going to turn himself in. He laughed again. "No, I'm going to disappear, and you're going to spend the rest of your life wondering where I am." Then the line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, my heart pounding. I immediately called Lieutenant Garner and told him everything. He told me to send him the recording. He said they would try to trace the call. The call came from a burner phone, untraceable, purchased with cash at a convenience store 2 states away. The FBI analyzed the background noise in the recording. They heard traffic, distant voices, the faint sound of a train horn. It was not enough to pinpoint a location. But Howard Leland had made a mistake. He had called me. He had spoken. And now his voice was on record. The FBI released the audio to the public, asking anyone who recognized the voice to come forward. Tips started pouring in. Most were dead ends, but one was different. A woman called from a small town near the Canadian border. She said she had rented a room in her house to a man matching Howard Leland's description. He paid cash. He kept to himself. He told her his name was Michael Prine. Police were dispatched immediately. By the time they arrived, he was gone. The rental room was in a converted garage behind a small house on a quiet street. The landlady, a woman named Margaret Hoffs, met the police at the door. She was in her 70s, visibly shaken, wringing her hands as she spoke. "He seemed normal," she kept saying. "Quiet, polite. He paid 3 months up front in cash. I didn't think anything of it." Lieutenant Garner called me from the scene. He told me they were processing the room, that Howard Leland, or Michael Prine, or whatever name he was using, had left in a hurry. The bed was unmade. The closet was half empty. But he had left things behind. "What kind of things?" I asked. "A duffel bag," Garner said. "Some clothing, and a notebook." I asked what was in the notebook. "I can't tell you yet," Garner said, "but it's bad." The notebook was sent to the FBI for analysis. I spent the next 2 days trying to get information, calling contacts, checking in with families, following every rumor. On the 3rd day, Garner called me back. "The notebook is a journal," he said. "Handwritten entries, dates, locations, observations." He was planning something, I asked what he was planning. Another abduction, Garner said. He had been watching a park near the rental house. He had written descriptions of children he saw there, their routines, what time they arrived, who they came with. He was selecting a target. I felt my chest tighten. Did he take anyone? No, Garner said. We checked. No reports of missing children in that area. We think the phone call to you spooked him. He realized he'd given away too much, so he ran before he could act. I asked if they had any idea where he went. We're tracking his movements, Garner said. The landlady said he left around midnight the day after the call. She heard his car start. She didn't think anything of it at the time. We've got surveillance footage from a gas station 10 miles north. A man matching his description filled up a vehicle and paid cash. Timestamp puts him there around 1 in the morning. After that, nothing. I asked what kind of vehicle. Dark sedan, Garner said. Older model, plates were obscured by mud. Deliberate. I asked if they thought he was heading for the border. Possibly, Garner said. We've notified Canadian Border Patrol. They're on alert. But if he's smart, he won't try to cross at an official checkpoint. There are remote areas, logging roads, places where you can slip through if you know what you're doing. I asked if he thought Howard Leland knew what he was doing. Yes, Garner said. This guy has been evading detection for decades. He knows how to disappear. The FBI released a statement to the media. They confirmed that Howard Leland had been located and had fled. They released an updated photograph, age progressed from his last known image, showing what he likely looked like now. They included the alias Michael Prine and asked the public to report any sightings. The tips started again. Dozens of them. Sightings from across the region. A man at a rest stop. A man at a diner. A man buying supplies at a hardware store. Each tip was investigated. Each one led nowhere. I kept following the story. I kept writing. I kept talking to families. And I kept thinking about the phone call, about the sound of his voice. Calm, controlled, almost amused. He had wanted me to know he was out there. He had wanted me to understand that he was in control, that he could reach out whenever he wanted, that he was not afraid. But he had made a mistake. He had revealed something about himself. He had revealed that he needed an audience, that the crimes themselves were not enough. He needed someone to witness them, to acknowledge them, to recognize what he had done. That need, I realized, was going to be his downfall. I decided to write an open letter. I published it on every platform I could access. News websites, social media, forums, anywhere it might reach him. The letter was simple. Howard Leland, you called me because you wanted to tell your story. You wanted someone to understand. But here's what I understand. You're not special. You're not unique. You're a predator who targeted the most vulnerable people in our society, and you documented it because you needed to feel powerful. But power is an illusion. You're not powerful. You're a coward. You're hiding because you know what's waiting for you. And no matter how far you run, no matter how many names you use, you will be found. Because the families of the children you took will never stop looking. The investigators will never stop searching. And I will never stop writing about you. You wanted recognition. You have it. The world knows what you are, and the world is watching. The letter went viral. It was shared thousands of times. News outlets picked it up. Families thanked me. Investigators told me it was a risk, that it might provoke him, but that it might also push him into making another mistake. 3 days later, I got another call. Unknown number. I answered. You think you know me, he said. It was him. I think I know enough, I said. You called me a coward, he said. That was a mistake. I asked him why. Because I'm not hiding, he said. I'm hunting. The line went dead. I called Garner immediately. I sent him the recording. The FBI traced the call. Another burner phone, but this time they got a location. The call had been made from a cell tower near a town called Ridgemont, about 100 miles south of the Canadian border. Police flooded the area. Roadblocks were set up. Surveillance was increased. The FBI coordinated with local agencies. Every motel, every gas station, every diner was checked. And then, 2 days later, a report came in. A man matching Howard Leland's description had been seen at a small grocery store on the outskirts of Ridgemont. He had purchased food and bottled water. He paid cash. The clerk remembered him because he did not make eye contact and because he asked if there were any hiking trails nearby. The clerk pointed him toward a state forest about 15 miles east. Search teams were deployed. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters scanned the area. The forest was dense, with miles of trails and remote campsites. It was the kind of place where someone could hide for weeks if they knew what they were doing. I drove to Ridgemont. I parked near the command center that had been set up at the edge of the forest. I watched as teams geared up and headed into the trees. I listened to the radio's chatter with coordinates and updates. And I waited. The first day of the search produced nothing. The second day, a team found a campsite, a small clearing with evidence of recent use, a fire pit with warm ashes, discarded food wrappers, boot prints in the mud, but no sign of Howard Leland. The dogs picked up a scent and followed it deeper into the forest. The trail led to a creek where the scent disappeared. Water erases tracks. He knew that. On the third day, a hiker called in a sighting. She had been on a remote trail and had seen a man sitting on a rock near the water. She said he looked at her and smiled. Then he stood up and walked into the trees. She did not think much of it until she saw the news that night. The area was swarmed, but by the time search teams arrived, he was gone. I started to realize something. Howard Leland was playing a game. He was leading them on. He wanted to be chased. He wanted the attention. He wanted to prove that he was smarter, faster, better at this than they were. And he was succeeding. Lieutenant Garner held a press conference. He confirmed that Howard Leland was in the area. He urged the public to remain vigilant. He asked anyone with information to come forward. But I could see the frustration in his face. They were close, but not close enough. That night, I got a third call. "Are you watching?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Good," he said, "because this is the part where it gets interesting." I asked him what he meant. You wanted to know why I do this, he said. Why I take them. Why I keep them. It's simple. Because I can. Because no one stops me. Because people like you write about people like me, and it makes me famous. I told him he was not famous. He was infamous. There was a difference. He laughed. Semantics. The point is, you're all playing my game. The police, the FBI, you, all of you, and I'm winning. I asked him what winning looked like to him. Staying free, he said, staying in control, making all of you dance. I asked him if he planned to stop. Why would I, he said. This is the most alive I've felt in years. I told him he was going to be caught, that it was inevitable. Maybe, he said, but not today. The line went dead. I sent the recording to Ghana. The FBI traced it. Same area, same general location. But he was moving. He was using burner phones and discarding them. He was staying just ahead of the search teams. The press picked up the story. National coverage. Howard Leland became a household name. His face was on every news channel. The case became a spectacle. And I hated it, because that was exactly what he wanted. I stopped answering calls from other reporters. I stopped doing interviews. I focused on the families, on the victims, on the children whose names deserved to be remembered more than his. But the calls kept coming, from him, once a week, sometimes twice, always from a different burner phone, always brief, always taunting. He told me where he had been, towns he had passed through, people he had seen. He described a diner where he had eaten breakfast, sitting at the counter next to a family with 2 young children. He described a park where he had sat on a bench watching kids play, and no one had noticed him. He was showing me that he could move freely, that he could be anywhere, that he was untouchable. The FBI tried to use the calls to track him. They analyzed the background noise. They mapped the locations. They narrowed the search radius. But he was always one step ahead. Months passed. The search continued, but the intensity waned. Resources were redirected. Other cases demanded attention. Howard Leland became a fugitive, a name on a wanted list, but the daily manhunt slowed. The families waited. Some of them reached out to me. They asked if I thought he would ever be caught. I told them I did not know, but I told them I would not stop looking. Angela Corey sent me a message. I need to know he's not out there taking more kids. I need to know this ends. I told her I understood, but I did not have an answer. Jennifer Arnett stopped returning my calls. I did not blame her. She had her answer. Her daughter was dead. There was nothing more I could give her. Rosa Delgado sent me a letter. She thanked me for keeping Mia's name in the story. She said it mattered that people remembered. She said it mattered that someone cared. I kept writing. I kept investigating. I kept following every lead. And then, almost 6 months after the manhunt began, something changed. I got a call from Marcus Webb. I think I found something, he said. I asked him what. A property, Marcus said, purchased under a shell company 20 years ago. The deed traces back to a trust. The trust was created by someone named Harold Leonard. I felt my pulse quicken. Where? Northern Idaho, Marcus said. Middle of nowhere, 40 acres, a cabin, no utilities, off the grid. I asked if he was sure. I'm sure, Marcus said. I pulled satellite images. There's a structure. Looks like it's been there for decades. And here's the thing. The property taxes have been paid every year, on time, in cash. I asked him how he found it. I've been going through every financial record I could access, Marcus said. Bank accounts, shell companies, property transfers. This one was buried deep, but it's there. I called Lieutenant Garner. I told him everything. He said he would contact the FBI. He said they would send a team. Don't go there yourself, Garner said. If he's there, he's dangerous. I told him I would not. I lied that I left that night. I did not tell anyone where I was going. I knew it was reckless. I knew it was dangerous. But I also knew that if I waited for the official channels, if I waited for warrants and logistics and coordination, Howard Leland might disappear again. And I needed to see it. I needed to see where this ended. The drive to northern Idaho took 18 hours. I stopped only for gas and coffee. I drove through the night, through small towns that barely registered as I passed, through stretches of highway where the only light came from my headlights cutting through the dark. By the time I reached the town nearest to the property, it was early morning. The town was called Hayward. Population 300. One gas station, one diner, a post office that looked like it had not been updated since the 1980s. I parked at the diner and went inside. A waitress in her 60s looked up from behind the counter. "Coffee?" she asked. I nodded. She poured a cup and set it in front of me. I asked her if she knew the area well. "Born here," she said. "Know every road, every trail, every person, within 50 miles. I asked her if she knew about a property about 15 miles north. 40 acres. A cabin. Her expression shifted slightly. Not much, but enough. "Why are you asking?" she said. I told her I was a journalist, that I was working on a story, that I needed to find the property. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she refilled my coffee without asking. "That property belongs to someone who doesn't want to be found," she said quietly. "People around here know to stay away from it." I asked her why. "Because the one time someone went up there, about 10 years ago, they came back and said they felt watched, said they heard something moving in the trees, said the place felt wrong. After that, no one went back." I asked her if she had ever seen the owner. She shook her head. "No, but I've seen someone come through town once or twice over the years. Always alone, always paid cash, never talked to anyone, just bought supplies and left." I asked her if she could describe him. "Average height," she said. "Dark jacket, hat pulled low, kept his head down. Could have been anyone." It matched. I asked her if she could tell me how to get to the property. She hesitated. Then she pulled a napkin from the counter and drew a rough map. A highway, a turnoff, a dirt road, a fork, then nothing but forest. "You sure you want to go up there?" she asked. I told her I was sure. Then be careful, she said. And if you see something you don't like, you leave. You hear me? I told her I would. I paid for the coffee and left. I got back in my car and followed the directions she had given me. The highway turned into a 2-lane road. The 2-lane road turned into gravel. The gravel turned into dirt, rutted and overgrown, barely wide enough for one vehicle. I drove slowly, my car bouncing over roots and rocks. The trees closed in on both sides, thick and tall, blocking out most of the light. The road forked. I took the left path, as the map indicated. After another mile, the road ended, just stopped. There was a small clearing, barely large enough to turn around. I parked and got out. The forest was silent. No birds, no wind, just the sound of my own breathing. I pulled my jacket tighter and started walking. There was no trail, but I could see faint impressions in the undergrowth. Boot prints, old ones, leading deeper into the trees. I followed them. The walk took 20 minutes. The ground sloped upward, then leveled out. And then I saw it. A cabin. Small. 1 story. Weathered wood. A stone chimney. Windows covered with boards. The door was closed but not locked. There was no car. No sign of recent activity. But something about the place made my skin crawl. I approached slowly. I stopped a few feet from the door and listened. Nothing. I reached out and pushed the door open. It swung inward with a creak. The inside was dark. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The cabin was sparse. A single room. A cot in the corner. A table. 2 chairs. A wood stove. Shelves along one wall, stocked with canned food and bottled water. Everything was clean, organized, deliberate. On the table was a notebook. I walked over and opened it. More entries, more dates, more descriptions. But these were different. These were not about children. These were about me. My name, where I lived, where I worked, my car, my routine. He had been watching me. I felt my stomach drop. I turned the page. There was a map, hand-drawn. It showed the property, the cabin, the surrounding forest, and marked in red ink, a spot about a 1/4 mile to the east. Next to it, a single word, cash. I took a photograph of the map with my phone. Then I heard something. A branch snapping. Outside. I froze. I turned off my flashlight and moved to the window. I peered through a gap in the boards. A figure, standing at the edge of the clearing, watching the cabin. It was him. Howard Leland. He was wearing a dark jacket, a hat. He stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides, his face partially obscured by shadow. I did not move. I did not breathe. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then he turned and walked back into the trees. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then I moved to the door and looked out. He was gone. I ran. I ran back the way I had come, stumbling over roots, my heart pounding, my breath ragged. I reached my car and fumbled with the keys. I got in, started the engine, and drove. I did not stop until I was back on the paved road. Then I pulled over and called Lieutenant Garner. "He's there," I said. "The cabin, he's there." Garner asked if I was safe. "I'm safe," I said, "but you need to get a team there now, before he disappears again." Garner told me to send him the location. I sent him the coordinates and the photograph of the map. He told me to stay away, to go back to town, to wait. I told him I would, but I did not leave. I drove back to the clearing and parked in a different spot, hidden from the road. I got out and moved quietly through the trees until I had a line of sight on the cabin. I waited. 2 hours later, I heard vehicles, distant at first, then closer. Then I saw them, 4 black SUVs, FBI. They parked where I had parked earlier. Agents got out, heavily armed, moving with precision. They surrounded the cabin. They announced themselves. They ordered anyone inside to come out. There was no response. They breached the door. They swept the cabin. They came out and signaled all clear. But he was not there. I watched as they searched the area. Dogs were brought in. They picked up a scent and followed it east toward the spot marked on the map. I followed at a distance, staying out of sight. The cash was buried. A metal box, 3 feet down, sealed with a padlock. The agents pulled it out and broke the lock. Inside were more notebooks, more photographs, more documentation, and something else. A hard drive. The agents bagged it and called for transport. I watched from the trees as they continued to search. But Howard Leland was not there. He had seen me. He had known they were coming. And he had run. Again. The hard drive was analyzed over the next week. It contained thousands of files, photographs, videos, documents, a complete archive of his crimes spanning 30 years. The FBI held a press conference. They confirmed that the cash had been found. They confirmed that the evidence linked Howard Leland to at least 19 missing children. Some of the cases had been cold for decades. Some had never been reported. 19 confirmed, but the FBI believed there were more. Families were notified. Some finally had answers. Some had their worst fears confirmed. Some were still waiting. I wrote about all of it. I wrote about the children. I wrote about the families. I wrote about the failures of the systems that should have stopped him. And I wrote about the fact that he was still out there. Because he was. The FBI issued a global alert. Interpol was notified. Border agencies in Canada and Mexico were put on high alert. His face was everywhere. But Howard Leland had vanished. Weeks turned into months. Sightings were reported and investigated. None of them panned out. He had gone to ground. And this time, he was not calling. I kept working the story. I kept talking to investigators. I kept searching. And then, almost a year after the cash was found, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Postmarked from a town I had never heard of, somewhere in the southwest. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, taken from a distance. I was standing outside my apartment, unlocking my car. The photo was recent, within the last month. On the back, written in careful handwriting, was a single sentence. "This isn't over." I called Lieutenant Garner immediately. He told me to pack a bag. He said they were putting me in protective custody. He said Howard Leland was escalating. I told him I was not going into hiding. "He's targeting you," Garner said. "You understand that, right? You've become part of his story, and he's not going to stop." I told him I understood, but I also told him that if I disappeared, the story would die, and I was not going to let that happen. Garner was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Then we do this the hard way." The FBI set up surveillance on my apartment. Agents rotated shifts. My phone was monitored. My movements were tracked. I was told not to go anywhere alone. I kept writing. I published an article about the photograph, about the fact that Howard Leland was still watching, still out there, still a threat. The article was shared widely. The public response was overwhelming. People were angry. People were scared. People wanted him found. And then, 2 weeks later, there was a break. A woman in a small town in Arizona called the FBI. She said she had rented a room to a man who matched Howard Leland's description. He had paid cash. He had kept to himself. But she had seen him watching the news, and when a story about the case came on, he had turned it off quickly and left the room. She became suspicious. She checked his room while he was out. She found a notebook. She recognized the handwriting from the photographs that had been released to the public. She called the FBI immediately. Agents were dispatched. They arrived within hours. They surrounded the property. But once again, he was gone. He had left in the middle of the night. The landlady had heard his car start around 3 in the morning. She thought nothing of it until she saw the news the next day. The FBI searched the room. They found more notebooks, more maps, more evidence that he was planning something. And they found another photograph. This one was of a park, a playground, children playing, and in the margin, a date, 2 weeks from now. The FBI issued an alert. They identified the park. It was in a suburb outside of Phoenix. They coordinated with local police. They set up surveillance. They prepared to wait. But I knew he would not show, because he knew they knew. He was playing with them. He was always playing. I flew to Phoenix. I rented a car. I drove to the park and sat in the parking lot, watching. 2 weeks passed. The FBI maintained their presence. Undercover agents posed as parents. Uniformed officers patrolled the perimeter. Nothing happened. And then, on the day he had marked, I got a call. Unknown number. I answered. "Did you really think I'd show up?" he said. "No," I said, "but I had to try." "You're persistent," he said. "I'll give you that." I asked him why he sent me the photograph. "Because I wanted you to know," he said. "I wanted you to understand that I could reach you any time I wanted, that you're not safe, that no one is safe." I told him he was wrong. I told him he was running out of places to hide, that eventually he would make a mistake. "Everyone makes mistakes," he said, "but not me, not yet." I asked him if he ever thought about the children. about what he took from them. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Every day." I asked him if he felt anything. "Yes," he said, "I feel alive." The line went dead. I sat in the parking lot, staring at my phone, feeling the weight of those words. He felt alive. That was what this was about. Not the children, not the families, not the pain he caused. It was about him. It was always about him. And as long as he was free, as long as he could call me, as long as he could send photographs and leave clues and lead investigators on chases that went nowhere, he would keep feeling alive. I realized something then, something that had been building for months. The only way to stop him was to take away his audience. I stopped writing about him. I stopped publishing updates. I stopped doing interviews. I told the families I would still help them, but I would no longer give Howard Leland the attention he craved. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, because I knew it meant the story would fade, that people would forget, that he would become just another name on a wanted list. But I also knew it was the right decision, because he needed the audience more than he needed the freedom. And without it, he would break. The silence lasted 3 months. No calls, no photographs, no sightings. The FBI continued their search, but the leads dried up. The media moved on to other stories. The families waited in the quiet, the same way they had waited for years before. I focused on other cases. I wrote about other missing children. I helped other families find their voices. But every day, I thought about Howard Leland. I thought about where he was, what he was doing, whether my silence had pushed him into hiding or pushed him towards something worse. Lieutenant Garner called me once a week. He told me the investigation was ongoing. He told me they had not given up, but I could hear the frustration in his voice. They were no closer to finding him than they had been a year ago. And then, on a Tuesday morning in late autumn, my phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at it. I had not received a call from an unknown number in months. I almost did not answer, but I did. "You stopped writing about me," he said. His voice was different, strained, tired. "Yes," I said. "Why?" I told him the truth, because you wanted the attention more than anything else, and I was not going to give it to you anymore. There was a long silence. "You think that stops me?" he said. "I think it takes away the only thing that makes this worthwhile for you," I said. Another silence. Longer this time. "You're wrong," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I asked him where he was. "Does it matter?" he said. "Yes," I said, "because eventually you're going to get caught. And when you do, all of this, everything you've done, it's going to end. And no one is going to remember you the way you want to be remembered. They're going to remember the children, and you're going to be forgotten." "I won't be forgotten," he said. But again, the certainty was gone. I asked him if he was tired. He did not answer right away. Then, quietly, he said, "Yes." "Then stop," I said. "Turn yourself in. Give the families the closure they need. Let this end." He laughed, but it was hollow. You think it's that simple? I think you don't have anywhere left to run, I said. The line went dead. I called Garner immediately and sent him the recording. The FBI traced the call. It came from a payphone in a rest stop outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Agents were dispatched. By the time they arrived, he was gone. But this time, they found something. A car, abandoned in the parking lot. The plates were fake, but the VIN matched a vehicle reported stolen 3 months earlier. Inside, they found a sleeping bag, empty food containers, maps, and another notebook. The notebook was different from the others. It was not filled with plans or documentation. It was filled with thoughts, fragments, stream of consciousness. The FBI shared excerpts with me. I read them in my car, parked outside my apartment, my hands shaking. I thought this would last forever. I thought I was untouchable, but the world has gotten smaller. There are cameras everywhere, databases, algorithms. I can't move the way I used to. I can't blend in. And now she stopped writing about me. The one person who understood, the one person who saw what I was doing and made it real. Without that, what's the point? Further down the page, I'm tired. I'm running out of money. I'm running out of places to go. I'm running out of reasons to keep going. And then, on the last page, maybe it's time to stop. Garner called me after the notebook was analyzed. He's breaking, he said. Your silence is working. He's unraveling. I asked if they thought he would turn himself in. I don't know, Garner said, but I think he's close. And if he makes contact with you again, we need you to keep him talking. We need to trace him. We need to bring him in before he does something desperate. I told him I would. 2 weeks later, he called again. This time, I was ready. I had the FBI monitoring the call in real time. I had instructions. Keep him talking. Ask open-ended questions. Do not provoke him. I've been thinking about what you said, he said when I answered. What did I say? I asked. That no one will remember me, he said. That I'll be forgotten. That's right, I said. But you'll write about me, he said. When this is over, you'll write the story. I'll write about the victims, I said. I'll write about the families. I'll write about the investigators who never stopped looking. But you'll be a footnote. He was quiet. I want you to understand something, he said finally. I didn't do this because I'm broken. I didn't do this because something happened to me as a child. I did this because I wanted to, because I could, because it made me feel like I was in control of something in a world that tries to control everything. I told him that control was an illusion. Maybe, he said, but it was my illusion, and now it's gone. I asked him where he was. Somewhere quiet, he said. Somewhere no one will find me. I asked him if he was planning to hurt anyone else. No, he said. I'm done. I asked him what that meant. It means I'm tired of running, he said. It means I'm ready for this to be over. I asked him if he was going to turn himself in. He did not answer. You could end this, I said. You could give the families the answers they need. You could do one thing right. And then what? He said. Spend the rest of my life in a cell? Be paraded in front of cameras? Become a spectacle? You're already a spectacle, I said. The only question is how it ends. You can end it on your terms, or you can wait until someone finds you. But either way, it's ending. There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing. I'll think about it, he said. The line went dead. The FBI traced the call. It came from a motel in a small town in West Texas. Agents arrived within 40 minutes. He was still there. They surrounded the building. They announced themselves. They ordered him to come out. He did not respond. They waited. Hours passed. Negotiators tried to make contact. They called the room. No answer. They knocked on the door. No response. Finally, they breached the door. Howard Leland was inside, sitting on the bed, hands in his lap. He looked up when they entered. He did not resist. He did not run. He just looked at them and said, "I'm ready." He was taken into custody without incident. He was transported to a federal facility. He was charged with 19 counts of kidnapping, murder, and related offenses. The families were notified. Angela Corey called me. She was crying. "They got him," she said. "They finally got him." I told her I was glad. I told her it was over. "It's not over," she said. "It's never going to be over. But at least now I know. At least now he can't hurt anyone else." Jennifer Arnett sent me a message. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for keeping Sophie's name alive." Rosa Delgado sent flowers to my office with a note. "Mia would have liked you." The trial took 2 years. Howard Leland pled not guilty. He represented himself for part of the proceedings. He gave long, rambling statements about control and identity and the nature of human desire. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. 19 consecutive life sentences. At his sentencing, several family members spoke. Angela Corey stood at the podium and looked directly at him. "You took my son," she said. "You took his life. You took his future. You took everything. But you didn't take his memory. Ethan is remembered. He is loved. And you? You're nothing. You're a ghost. And you always will be." Howard Leland did not react. He sat in his chair, staring straight ahead, expressionless. When it was over, when he was led out of the courtroom in chains, I watched him go. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just emptiness. Because the children were still gone. The families were still broken. And no sentence could undo what had been done. I wrote one final article. I wrote about the case. About the investigation. About the children who were found and the children who were still missing. About the families who waited and the families who finally had answers. And I wrote about the systems that failed, the red flags that were ignored, the tips that were not followed up on, the warnings that were dismissed. I wrote about how Howard Leland was not an anomaly. He was not a monster who appeared out of nowhere. He was a man who was allowed to operate for decades because people did not want to see, because it was easier to look away. I ended the article with the names. All 19 children. Their ages, their faces, their stories. Because they deserve to be remembered. And Howard Leland deserved to be forgotten. The article was published. It was shared widely. It sparked conversations about child safety, about surveillance, about the gaps in missing persons investigations. Some things changed, some things did not. But the families reached out. They thanked me. They told me it mattered. They told me the children's names were still being spoken. And that, I realized, was enough. I closed the file on Howard Leland. I archived my notes. I deleted his number from my phone. And I moved on to the next case, the next family, the next child waiting to be found. 5 years have passed since Howard Leland was sentenced. The media moved on. The headlines faded. The story became history, filed away in archives and documentaries, a cautionary tale told in criminology classrooms and true crime forums. But for the families, time does not move the same way. Angela Corey still lives in the same house where she raised Ethan. She kept his room exactly as it was. The bed is still made. The posters are still on the walls. His toys are still on the shelves. She goes in there sometimes, she told me, just to sit, just to remember what it felt like when he was alive. She started a foundation in his name, the Ethan Corey Foundation for Missing Children. It provides resources to families of missing children. It funds search efforts. It advocates for policy changes. It keeps children's cases active when law enforcement moves on. She invited me to speak at one of their annual fundraisers. I told her I was not comfortable being in the spotlight. She told me it was not about me. It was about the children. So, I went. I stood at a podium in a hotel conference room filled with families who had lost children. Families who were still searching. Families who had found their children but lost them anyway. Because what came back was not the same child who had been taken. I told them I was sorry. I told them their children mattered. I told them I would keep telling their stories as long as I could. When I finished, a woman approached me. She was in her 40s, thin with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of years without proper sleep. My daughter disappeared 6 years ago, she said. Her name is Emma Fieldstone. She was 9. She was at a friend's birthday party. She went outside to get something from the car. She never came back. I asked her if the case was still open. Technically, she said, but no one is actively working it. The detective retired. The new detective has 60 other cases. I call every week. They tell me they are doing everything they can, but I know they are not. I asked her if she had any leads, anything that stood out. There was a man, she said, at the party. He was not a parent. He said he was a friend of the family hosting. But when I asked them later, they said they did not know him. The police took a statement. They tried to find him, but they never did. I asked her if she could describe him. Average height, she said. Dark jacket, hat. I never saw his face clearly. The description made my chest tighten. I asked her what town she lived in. Belridge, she said. About 2 hours north of here. I took out my phone and pulled up a map. Belridge was close to one of the towns Howard Leland had passed through during his time on the run. Close enough. I asked her if she had ever heard of Howard Leland. Her face went pale. Yes. I followed the case. I thought there might be a connection. But the police said he was already in custody when Emma disappeared. They said it could not have been him. I asked her when exactly Emma disappeared. She told me the date. I pulled up my notes. I cross-referenced the timeline. Howard Leland had been in custody. He had been locked up for 3 years by the time Emma vanished. But the description matched his pattern. The location fit his known route. And the man at the party, the one no one knew, sounded like someone who had studied his methods. I asked her if I could look into it. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Please help me find her. I took her contact information. I told her I would do everything I could. When I got home that night, I called Marcus Webb. I asked him if he still had access to the databases he used to track Howard Leland. I do, he said. Why? I told him about Emma Fieldstone. I told him about the man at the party. I told him about the pattern. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You think someone else is doing this?" "I think it is possible," I said. "I will start digging," Marcus said. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus compiled a list. Missing children cases from the years since Howard Leland had been incarcerated. Cases that matched his methodology. Cases where witnesses described a man who sounded familiar. He found 8 cases. 8 children disappeared under similar circumstances, all within a 200-mile radius of the areas Howard Leland had operated in. I brought the information to Lieutenant Garner. He was skeptical at first, but when he reviewed the files, his expression changed. "This is not random," he said. "Someone is following his playbook." I asked him if Howard Leland could have had an accomplice. "It is possible," Garner said. "We always assumed he worked alone, but we never found evidence either way." He said he would open an investigation. He said he would contact the families. He said he would assign a task force. But I knew how these things worked. I knew how long it would take. And I knew that while they were organizing, someone was still out there. So I started investigating on my own. I visited the towns where the children had disappeared. I talked to families. I reviewed witness statements. I looked at security footage. I searched for patterns. And I found one. In 6 of the 8 cases, there had been a utility worker in the area around the time of the disappearance. Someone checking meters. Someone inspecting lines. Someone who had a reason to be there and a reason to go unnoticed. I pulled records from the utility companies. I requested work orders. I cross-referenced employee lists. And I found a name that appeared in 3 of the towns. Leonard Hayes. The name was too close. Leonard Hayes. Rearranged letters from Harold Leonard. Harold Hayes. A pattern. I ran a background check. Leonard Hayes had a clean record. No criminal history. No red flags. He had worked for a regional utility company for the past 5 years. He moved frequently. He took short-term contracts in different towns. And every town he worked in had a missing child case within 6 months. I called Garner and gave him the name. He said he would bring Leonard Hayes in for questioning. 2 days later, Garner called me back. "We found him," he said. "He was living in a motel outside of Clarksville. We brought him in. We questioned him. He denied everything, but we got a warrant to search his vehicle." I asked what they found. "A notebook," Garner said, "just like the ones Howard Leland kept. Dates, locations, descriptions, and a photograph of a little girl, Emma Fieldstone." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Is she alive?" I asked. "We do not know yet," Garner said. "He is not talking, but we have teams searching every property associated with him. Every motel he stayed at, every storage unit he rented. We are going to find her." I asked if I could speak to Leonard Hayes. Garner hesitated. "Why?" "Because I think he will talk to me," I said. "I think he wants the same thing Howard Leland wanted. Recognition." Garner was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I will see what I can do." 3 days later, I sat in an interview room across from Leonard Hayes. He was younger than I expected, mid-30s, thin, pale. He looked at me with a strange mixture of curiosity and contempt. "You wrote about him," he said. "About Howard." I told him I did. "He was brilliant," Leonard said. "The way he moved, the way he planned, the way he controlled everything. I studied him. I learned from him." I asked him if he knew Howard Leland personally. "No," he said, "but I wrote to him in prison. I sent letters. He never wrote back. But I knew he was reading them. I knew he understood." I asked him where Emma Fieldstone was. He smiled. "Why would I tell you?" "Because you want the same thing he wanted," I said. "You want someone to know. You want someone to understand what you have done." He leaned back in his chair. "You are right. I do want that. But I also want something else." I asked him what. "I want you to write about me," he said, "the same way you wrote about him. I want people to know my name." I told him I would not do that. His smile faded. "Then Emma stays where she is." I leaned forward. "You do not understand. Howard Leland thought the same thing. He thought the attention mattered. He thought being remembered mattered. But he was wrong. No one remembers him the way he wanted to be remembered. They remember the children. And that is all they will remember about you." Leonard Hayes stared at me. His jaw tightened. "You are lying," he said. "I am not," I said. "If you tell me where Emma is, if you give her back to her family, that is the only chance you have at being anything other than a footnote. But if you let her die, you are nothing. Just another coward who hurt children, because you could not hurt anyone who could fight back." His hands clenched into fists. "She is alive," he said finally. I asked him where. "A cabin," he said, "about 30 miles west of Clarksville. Off Route 14. There is a dirt road. Half a mile in, she is in the cellar. She is locked in, but she is alive. I left her food, water. I was going to go back." I asked him why he took her. He looked down at his hands. "Because I wanted to feel what he felt. I wanted to understand." I asked him if he did. He shook his head. No, I just felt empty. I stood up and left the room. I told Garner everything. He dispatched a team immediately. They found the cabin. They found the cellar. And they found Emma Fieldstone. She was alive, dehydrated, terrified, but alive. She was reunited with her mother that night. I was there when it happened. I watched them hold each other, sobbing, unable to let go. Her mother looked at me over Emma's shoulder. She mouthed the words, "Thank you." I nodded, but I did not feel relief. I felt exhausted, because I knew this would happen again. Somewhere, someone else would read about Howard Leland. Someone else would decide to follow his path. Someone else would take a child. And I would be there, writing about it, searching for them, trying to bring them home. Because that is the work. That is what remains when the monsters are caught and the trials are over and the headlines fade. The work of remembering, the work of searching, the work of refusing to look away. Leonard Hayes was charged and convicted. He received a life sentence. Emma Fieldstone is in therapy. She is recovering. Her mother says she has good days and bad days. But she is alive. And that matters. The rain has stopped now. I can see the first light of dawn coming through the window. The world is waking up. People are starting their days, going to work, taking their kids to school, living their lives. Most of them will never know these stories. Most of them will never hear these names. But some will, and some will remember, and some will look a little closer, pay a little more attention, ask one more question, and maybe, just maybe, that will be enough to stop the next one. I close my notebook. I turn off my recorder. I stand up and stretch. The work continues. It always does.